Unplugged, 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 unplugged.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Unplugged. Today I'm talking with Angie Taylor. Hi Angie.
Hi John.
Angie, now you're a motion artist and an author, would that be correct?
Yep.
I know we're going to talk about how your role has changed over the years. It's very interesting. What I'd really like to find out first of all though is a little bit about your background. Generally with Unplugged I ask my guests where they got started. So where did you get started?
Well, I started by going to art college, and I did a degree in sculpture and drawing at art college. And I kind of left art college and thought, what the hell can I do with a sculpture degree?
Okay,
And
so
I thought,
you didn't think about what the hell can you do with a sculpture degree before you started?
well, no, I just had this kind of idealistic dream of being an artist. I didn't really think about how I was going to make money, and I was a bit of a punk and a rebel at the time, so
Right.
I just thought, I want to be an artist suffering in my garret kind of thing. So I opted for fine art. I enjoyed some of the design subjects because in the foundation year I did jewellery and silversmithing and printmaking and a little bit of graphic design as well. And although I enjoyed them, I found that they kind of limited me a little too much in terms of expression, and I just wanted to have freedom of expression, and I really didn't think practically about it at all. So when I left, I thought, you know, what am I going to do with this degree? I can either make gravestones or become a prop maker. So I sort of put a knapsack on my back and moved down to London and became a prop maker. And
So
was
you're
making
prop maker for film?
Yeah, I was making props and models for the film and television industry for about 2 or 3 years. And I was also a DJ at the time, so I was DJing in clubs at night, making props during the day. And when I was DJing, I did some music and technology courses using the first version of Cubase on
Right.
Amiga.
Yep.
And that kind of got me interested in computers. And in my prop making job, I went into visual effects departments and I saw them using Photoshop. And I was like, wow, you know, what's this stuff? And I kind of got into the sequencing with music. And then I started thinking about, you know, what if you could sequence images with computers? And I gave up prop making and bought myself a Mac and just funded myself with the DJing for a few years.
And Angie, sorry to interrupt you. What version of Photoshop was that? How long ago was this?
Well, when I started using, so the first version I saw used was probably the first version of Photoshop because it was pretty new at the time.
Yep.
But I didn't actually start using it till version 3 because the graphic design course that I went on used CorelDRAW.
Right.
And so that was the first software application I learned was CorelDRAW.
Yeah.
And then I finished that course and did another graphic design course where I learned Photoshop, and that was on Photoshop 3. And really, I mean, I hadn't really thought, even at that point, what I wanted to do. I just thought, I'm really interested in computers and how I can work with computers. And I actually went to a party one night, bumped into this guy who started talking about computers, got on really well. And I said to him, I noticed he had a Mac because it was at his house.
Yep.
And anyway, the next day I thought, I really want to buy a computer, but I need some advice whether to get Mac or PC because the course was all PCs.
Mm.
So I went to speak to him and I said, look, I really want to get a computer. Should I get a Mac or a PC? And it was an old classic, you know, that he had. And he went, get a Mac, get a Mac. And he said, listen, if you get a Mac, I'll get you some software for it. And I said, really? And he said, yeah, I work for this company called Adobe. And I went, oh, right. And he said, we make Photoshop. And I said, oh, yeah, I've seen Photoshop, you know. And he said, so I went and got a Mac, got all my money together. I was really, you know, not earning very much.
And they were very expensive at that time.
They were really expensive. I really had to shop around to get, you know, what I needed because I needed a scanner and printer and all that stuff as well. Because I thought I was going to do traditional graphic design at that point. And then Rory, my friend from Adobe, who was the product manager, actually European product manager for After Effects at the time.
Right.
That was when they had a European headquarters in Edinburgh. So he got me Photoshop, and I made a little card to thank him for it. And he just had a baby, so I took his picture of his baby I put a Mohican on it and Mum and Dad on its knuckles and a leather jacket and stuff. And I did it all with a mouse. I only had a mouse at the time. And he was just blown away by it. And he said, look, if you can do that in one day on Photoshop, why don't you come and demo it for us at a trade show? And I was like...
So you've just started using Photoshop?
Yeah.
And you're already being asked to demo it, right?
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, the techniques, because I'd done painting at art college as well, so I did painting in first year. And painting was actually what I went to art college to do.
Yeah.
I got sidetracked into sculpture, really, because I did some sculpture that was really popular in first year, and
right.
I kind of got charmed into the sculpture department by the tutors. But anyway, the painting skills that I'd learned at college were just transferred to the computer.
So they just immediately transferred across to what you could do in Photoshop?
Yeah, I just thought, oh wow, the smudge, I loved the smudge tool. So I used to use the smudge tool a lot because I didn't have pressure sensitivity with the pen.
Yeah, right, use a mouse.
So I'd use the mouse to like paint the rough colours, and then I'd use the smudge tool and the blur tool to kind of blend in stuff. And I just really enjoyed it.
If you could do that then with a mouse all those years ago, what are you able to do now in Photoshop? Because you've got really wonderful art style brushes in Photoshop now. You must be able to do pretty much anything you want.
They are pretty amazing, yeah. I mean, the only thing about me is I tend to avoid doing my own work and do work for other people instead.
Okay.
Because I still have this thing that I got at art college, this kind of... I felt that before I went to art college, I was good at art at school. You know, I was one of the top people at school at art. And then I really wanted to go to art college, and I went to art college, and suddenly I was surrounded by hundreds of people that were at least as good at me, but a lot of them were much, much better at me than I. And I find that art college and the way that they taught at art college, it really kind of knocked the passion out of my art, and my confidence just got really badly knocked at college. And I don't think I've ever really fully recovered from that. So that's part of the reason why I kind of make stuff for other people, because it's kind of, I can just come up with ideas and make stuff and give it to other people, and then they can go and face the client and do all that stuff and argue their case that it's a good design. I don't have to do all of that. So I'm just a coward, really.
So you got into Photoshop. Where did you go from there?
Right. So he said, okay. I said, I'd said I was interested in animation. I'd actually applied for a job, and I applied for something like 40 graphic design jobs. Didn't get any of them. But one of them had asked me to submit a standalone presentation on a disc. And I was like, I've never used any software other than Photoshop. So Rory, my friend at Adobe, he said, well, I'll get you a copy of Adobe Persuasion. You can do presentations with that. So I built this little standalone presentation that went on a floppy and submitted that as my application for the job, which I didn't get. But anyway, he really liked it, and he said, you know, if you like motion stuff, you should look at my product, After Effects. Brought me After Effects, and that was it. I was just like, it was like little hearts exploding, birds tweeting, you know. I was like,
I saw those hearts and birds too.
Oh, I just loved it. Absolutely loved it. And he recommended that I get Brian Maffitt's Total Training, which was on VHS at the time.
Yep, I had that too.
And I got that, and I just watched it from end to end. Absolutely loved Brian Maffitt's delivery and training, still do. He's, you know, one of my biggest influences. Him and Russell Brown, believe it or not. I watched a lot of his training as well.
Brian's actually making a comeback with his training now, which is exciting.
Yeah, really exciting. Yeah, really good to see him back where he should be.
Where he should be, definitely. I think he just released Illustrator, and I think he's he's doing After Effects as well.
Yeah.
You've got some Illustrator and After Effects training as well. We're going to talk about in a minute.
I do.
Happen to have some right there. So you fell in love with After Effects.
I did. Head over
I know exactly how that feels, because I did the same thing. I remember sitting in front of my Mac, and I got to use After Effects now and then, and I just remember thinking, I can do this full time. This is all I want to do. I just want to be in After Effects. At the time I was doing editing, but I just want to spend all my time in After Effects, and that was 16 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, I was exactly the same. I think it was version 3 I started on After Effects. And I was actually unemployed at the time. So I had all the time in the world, but no money. So I
Mm.
just spent my whole time playing with After Effects, trying out different things. And then someone gave me a lucky break. I was writing to production companies and TV companies and saying, that I'd gone on a, that was it. I couldn't get a job, so I went on a business startup course to learn how to start your own business.
Yep.
And that gave me a lot of confidence. So I started writing letters to production companies, TV companies saying, I do animation and graphics with After Effects. And a lot of them were just like laughing at me on computers, ha ha ha.
Yeah.
Like at the time, they were still using Paintbox and Editbox, and the expensive proprietary Quantel systems.
Mm.
And a lot of them just didn't really take computers seriously as a alternative to that. But there was one guy, James Hawkes, at a company called Atacama, that was making a program about James Cook that discovered
Captain
where he
James
lived,
Cook. Yep. Yep.
for the Cook Museum in Middlesbrough, and that was
Right.
my first After Effects job. So I did worked on a movie with him in a place called St Boswells in Edinburgh, which is in the middle of the borders, quite tucked away in a little corner of
Right.
Scotland. And there was me and an editor who'd just finished college, and James, who was a larger-than-life eccentric character, who I have a lot of time for. And we made this film. I did the After Effects work on it, and we were working on Avid and After Effects, and at the time it was a nightmare just trying to figure out how things worked. And I learnt all about, interlacing and fields
Yep.
and those problems on the job. And
Yeah.
really, he was, because he knew he was kind of taking a chance with young people with new ideas, and he was very patient and understanding, and allowed us the time to be able to figure things out.
Mm.
So really good learning process, that job. And then from that, I had a show reel and took it to Picardy in Edinburgh. We're a production company, and they gave me a couple of jobs, and then started doing stuff for Children's BBC up in Scotland,
Mm.
which is a thing. I love making kids television stuff, and that I'm really good at. My design isn't the kind of polished, serious, flashy kind of design that you'd see on adult things. It's more kind of kids, kind of
Right.
jokey design work that I really enjoy doing.
There aren't that many women in this industry compared to men. It's definitely a male-dominated industry. Back then, when it was really, a growing industry, was it difficult or more difficult because you were a female, or did it make any difference?
I think it does make a difference. I think as a woman, I kind of imbibe that kind of difficulty anyway. It's like it is more difficult to kind of push yourself in any industry that's male dominated.
Mm.
And this industry is the same. Um, and people don't take, like, for example, when I'm working on trade shows, I've had people coming up to me and going, "Excuse me, I want to talk to someone about After Effects." And I go, "Well, I can Effects." And they go, "No, I want to talk to him." And they'll point at some
You're
sales or
joking.
so what I do is I go, "Okay." So I take them up to him and I say, "Excuse me, this man wants to talk to you about After Effects." And he goes, and he says, "Oh, I want to know about da, da, da." And he goes, "Well, you better ask Angie, she's the expert." And then they come back sheepishly to me and say,
It's
so
unbelievable
yeah,
that that actually happens still, though.
oh yeah, it does. But luckily I've always been a bit of a tomboy, and I'm happy to kind of push myself, and I think that really helps. I don't know how I would have done it if I'd been a shy, shrinking violet. I don't think I
Mm.
could have. So, and I'm just quite bullish in some ways. I'm quite happy to raise my voice in public and actually be pushy where I need to,
Yeah,
hopefully
sure.
enough.
Sure.
One thing that I find quite amusing is that little old punky Angie from Scotland now hangs out with some of the most corporate guys in the industry and goes and has beers with them. And some of my best friends are corporate guys in suits, which I would never have seen happening, through my work with like Adobe and Apple and other companies like that.
Well, you've built up your reputation over a number of years. I mean, you definitely. I mean, there's few women in the industry, and there's even fewer women that actually teach like you do. But you definitely stand out from the crowd, even if you weren't in this industry.
Yeah, it helps. I remember at the Media Motion Ball, Brian Maffett making a joke about that, how he was saying, as an industry veteran, how do I stand out amongst the young ones? I kind of include myself as with the older ones now, but he'd mentioned maybe I should get a funny accent and some earrings.
Because when I first met you, you were wearing those same earrings.
Yeah,
That's right.
I've had, I think 17 or 18. Like my dad said to me, "You must never get your ears pierced." I was like, "Right."
Right. Fit as many as I can on there.
I was I was at a Rosillo's gig, band from the 70s punk band, and I saw this guy who had his ear pierced like this all the way around, and I just thought I want to do that. So it was an ambition, which and then I started doing that one. I got bored, so that one's only got a few in it.
You got into After Effects and you fell in love with it. You watched all of Brian's training. Where did that take you?
I worked in Soho in London as a freelancer, worked on short films, music videos. Probably the most well-known was Rubber Johnny that I worked on with Chris Cunningham. People coming up to me and going, "You worked on Rubber Johnny." But really, I was only, doing little morphing animations. He was the creative genius behind that. And that was with revision effects, which I really love there.
Yep.
It's for After Effects. And then I was, still doing demo work for Adobe. Probably I did probably about 3 or 4 trade shows a year for them.
And that was all from that Photoshop gig that you got?
Originally, yes,
Wow.
and then just subsequent trade shows. I did IBC, NAB, and a couple of UK ones, Broadcast Video Expo.
Were you comfortable presenting?
I really kind of took to it straight away. I've always been a bit of a show-off and a chatterbox. I love talking to people. I love communicating with people. And,
Absolutely. I think the bigger the group, the better. Being in front of 100 or 200 people presenting some of this stuff it's a real buzz.
it is a real buzz. Yeah. The worst one though was when I did one at an IMAX theatre, and I suddenly turned around and saw my face like blown up about 1 million times on the screen behind me, and I was like, "Oh!" So that was quite. And I suddenly realised that everyone could see, my pores and my hair. So,
And that was the last IMAX presentation you did. So you did trade shows. How did you get into authoring?
when I was presenting at trade shows, you'd get all sorts of people coming onto the booth, including publishers. And one day, the commissioning editor from Focal Press was on the Adobe booth speaking to Steve Kaliski, who was the senior product manager for After Effects
Yeah.
at the time, and asked him if he knew of any potential authors for an After Effects book, because there weren't any at that time. So Steve said, "Oh, you should talk to Angie Taylor." And I'd written some demo materials for Adobe before that. So they'd said to me, "Would you be interested in writing a book?" And I was like, "Hmm." And Steve said, "Look, it'll just be like writing, lots of course materials." Lie.
Yeah.
Innocent lie, but still a lie. So I kind of thought, oh yeah, maybe it'll just be like multiplying what I've done already. So I kind of said yes, I would do it. Started writing it and realised that it's a lot more complicated than that. There has to be cross-referencing, you've
Yeah.
got to design assets, blah, blah, blah. And then halfway through the book, just to make matters worse, I found out that Trish Meyer and Chris Meyer were writing a book on After Effects. And I thought, why am I bothering? Because I know that, Chris and Trish are my other big After Effects heroes.
Yep.
And I learnt so much from them on the Media Motion list, particularly for After Effects. And of course, Pro Video Coalition and all of that. So when I found out they were writing a book, it was like art college again. It knocked my confidence, and I thought, how am I ever going to provide anything that's useful in comparison to them? Because their knowledge is much broader.
I know, and Chris and Trish had been writing for DV magazine for a long time before they released that book. They had a lot of content to draw on.
They did, and their attention to detail is fantastic. My attention to detail isn't really my thing. So at that point, I decided, theirs is going to be the encyclopedia for After Effects. I'll make mine a kind of creative guide to the features of After Effects and try and make it more project-based.
Yeah.
But I kind of had to change the structure halfway through the book, and I think it kind of suffered a little bit from that. So it kind of ended up being half and half, but it was quite well received, and it was actually through that book that I ended up working with Chris Cunningham because he'd bought my book and read it, and also Joan Arma Trading and a few other famous people had bought my book and then asked me to do training. So I trained.
I never get asked by famous people to do stuff because I do After Effects.
Your Jarvis Cocker's agent phoned me and asked me if I'd do training, and I said yes, but they wouldn't pay me.
Ah, okay. I don't want to know if they won't pay me. So that was Creative After Effects 5, right?
That was, and then I updated it for version 7.
Version 7.
And again, I tried to. They wanted me to make it bigger and better and expand it. And again, I think I should have just done a straight rewrite of the book because I think I just took on a little bit too much with that. And I love writing books, but I find the update cycle for software is just too fast. You just don't have enough to really hone and perfect your writing. So after the After Effects book, I decided I wouldn't do software books anymore, but I wanted to take all the stuff that I'd written about design
and write this book.
Yeah, which is really a design guide for people that haven't studied design.
Design essentials for the motion media artist. So tell us a bit about this.
It's really an inspiration. I hope it's an inspirational book for artists and designers who want to get into designing for motion media. And that could be people that are crossing over from other disciplines like photography or print graphic design, for example. Or it could be people who have no training at all and just want to, maybe programmers don't have any design or art training at all, but want to get into being able to do a bit of design work. Editors that want to do motion graphics.
Yep.
So it has chapters on things like drawing and composition, learning how to compose elements on screen, typography, colour.
It's all the fundamentals, isn't it? All the foundation stuff.
Yeah, it's the basic principles of design and animation, basically, in the book.
I never went to design school, and I basically picked up a lot of this stuff just doing it for the last decade and a half. But it's nice to be able to find. There's very few sources like this. It's really terrific to be able to find that sort of information all in one book. And I remember when I started wondering, where can I go to find this information? It felt like there was a big gap in my knowledge. So it's terrific source of information for everything to do with design essentials.
Well, there were two inspirations to writing that. One was people at trade shows coming up to me and saying, okay, I've learnt the software, but it still looks shit. What am I doing? Have you learnt about the rules of design and animation? Or the timing's not right, they would say. And they said no, and I said, well, you need to go and get this book and that book and that book and that book and that book. And this will teach you everything you need to know about typography, composition, perspective, da-da-da-da-da. And also I was teaching at the local art college, which I still do. And the students there, I was having to tell them to go and take 10 books out of the library for their foundation course.
Yeah, right.
They were having to fight over books because there weren't enough books. And I thought, why don't they just have 10 books? Because they only really needed, a small percentage of each book to learn enough to get them going. So I thought, why isn't there a book that just covers all of the principles in a small amount, just enough to get someone going? Yeah. And that's what it's designed to be. It's not designed to be comprehensive. It gets you up and running with the principles, gets you thinking about them, and then points you in the right direction where to find more information on them.
You've also recorded some training recently. You're doing some stuff with Video to Brain. That's a fairly recent venture. I know that you've recorded some After Effects training with Todd Copriver from Adobe, and also some Illustrator training. Do you want to tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, I've known Gerhard Koren for years. He was an After Effects demo artist as well. And we met at trade shows. And he'd always been asking me to do an After Effects training on video.
Yep.
And I just couldn't really see the point because I was really busy. So I just kind of kept putting it off. And then when I was at Gridiron Software, which was really good for a while, it became a little bit corporate. And I was able to still work on my own projects when I was at Gridiron. That's one thing I'll always be grateful to Steve Ford and the others at Gridiron 4. So they allowed me to work on my own project. So I asked them if it would be okay if I recorded a series for After Effects in my spare time while I was working at Gridiron. They said that would be fine. So I went over to Graz, to the Video to Brain offices,
That's
and
right.
recorded with Todd, and it was fantastic. Todd and I think, worked well together and are actually getting better as we work together,
Yeah.
because takes care of all the technical stuff, which I'm not as confident about, and I take care of all the kind of creative stuff. And between us, I think we create a good balance, and we're kind of gradually working each version of our Video to Brain Learn by Video series. We're working on kind of refining it a little bit more and getting it in a more logical order and working well. And I think this one, the new one, we're really proud of.
Have you got a copy there we can have a look at?
I have. This is After Effects Learn by Video.
And this is After
And
Effects CS6.
it is. It's DVD, and it comes with a book as well, which outlines some of the core principles.
Very nice.
And
That's
the
also available online though for download.
Yeah, you can subscribe to Video to Brain. You can get different types of subscription where you get access to all of their training, and this included in that. Or you can buy individual products. You can actually go to my own website at angietaylor.co.uk,
Yep.
and I have a store on there, the video store, where you can buy this as well individually or by subscription.
You've also got some Illustrator training.
I have Illustrator Learn by Video, which I did with a really great guy at Video to Brain again called Chad Chelius. I'm never sure if I pronounce these names properly, but apologies, Chad, if I didn't pronounce it properly. And that again is 13 hours of Illustrator training, so like a 2-day Illustrator course.
So Angie, what's next for you?
Well, at the moment, I've kind of invented a job, I think. So when I was at Gridiron, when I joined Gridiron, they said, "What?" I was like, "Well, what will my job title be?" Because I wasn't really in marketing, I wasn't really in product management. I was somewhere kind of in between, creating tutorials, helping design the website, writing user guides and things like that. So they said, well, creative director, because you're doing all the kind of creative bits that join everything together in the software. And then I've started doing that now at GenArts. So having a mixed role, working for GenArts a couple of days a week doing the presets, I love. Because I love coming up with ideas. I could do that all day. And then I do my recording tutorials for Video to Brain. I'm just doing some at the moment for Adobe through Video to Brain.
Yep.
And then I'm also doing a bit of design work. So I've got a couple of jobs that I'm talking to people about. One is working with the people that did the light shows for the Paralympics.
Nice.
And that would be doing projection mapping, but creating files in After Effects for that.
Thanks very much for your time. It's been a pleasure to learn a little bit more about you.
Yep, you too. Thank you very much for giving me the time to communicate with the outside world.
Definitely check out Design Essentials for the Media Motion Artist, everybody, Angie's book, and also Angie's Illustrator and After Effects training on Video to Brain.
And I'll also sort out a discount code for you, John, for all your listeners. So I'll fix that for you after we finish.
Fantastic. We'll put that on the post. Thanks, everyone, for watching Unplugged. We'll see you again soon.